Hey everyone, welcome to SingularityComputers Client Build 7, and the name of this build is Dark Matter. As you can see, I have some awesome hardware here. This is going to be a mid-range to high-end gaming system built into the NZXT Switch 810, and it's going to have a fairly high-end water cooling system. So I'm now going to get started with an overview of the components. So the motherboard is the Asus Maximus 5 formula, the CPU, the Intel Core i7-3770K. The power supply is the Corsair AX750. I'm using a 16 gig kit of Corsair Dominator Platinum, 1866 MHz. Two SSDs, they're Samsung 830 series, a 128 gig and a 256 gig, and also a Western Digital Green 2 terabyte. In combination with the AX750, I'm using a Corsair black individually sleeved cable kit. This build is actually going to have an optical drive, which is unusual for my builds. The graphics card is an EVGA GTX 660 Ti, and the case is the NZXT Switch 810 gunmetal. So now for a look at the water cooling components. So I have here some EK Nickel Plexi CSQ water blocks, the EK Supremacy and the EK FC 670, which actually fits onto this 660 Ti. Now these are some components that I'm definitely going to change. I have the Swiftech MCP35X, a bits power 150mm reservoir, and the EK DDC X-Top CSQ Nickel Plexi. I'm going to swap these to a Swiftech MCP655 with a full bits power mod kit, upgrade kit, and bits power reservoir. So you'll be seeing those later in the build log. Now I'm going to use two EK Coolstream radiators. In the roof of the case, the XT360, and in the floor of the case, the XTX240. The radiator fans are Noise Blocker Black Solent Pro PLPS. I also have some case fans on the way. They're Noise Blocker Black Solent Pro PK2s. Now, to fit with the dark matter theme, I have here some Master Clear UV blue tubing, and in combination with this tubing I'm going to use black coolant. This is something I haven't done before, so I'm really looking forward to the way it's going to turn out. I think it's going to look amazing because the black coolant, is incredibly dark, but in front of that the tubing is going to give a blue glint. This coolant is Mayhem's X1 Oil Black. I'm swapping it to Mayhem's Pastel Pure Black because I think it's going to work a lot better with the tubing. I'll talk about that later in the build log. So that's a brief overview of all of the components. I'm now going to get started on the build, and I'll show you the components in more detail as I'm installing them. Some of the components I've reviewed, so instead of showing them twice, I'll just link you off to the reviews that I've done. Now, no doubt I'm going to get comments on the graphics card being a little bit underpowered compared to the rest of the components. I'm going to talk about this later in the build log. Okay, as you can see, I've started the build. And what I'm going to do is not show you any of the build process in the early stages because it's very straightforward. There's not much to see. All I'm doing is bolting components together. Instead, I'm going to show you a whole lot more of the process in the later stages of the build when I'm constructing the water cooling loop, and then there's so much more to see. It's going to be a lot more interesting. So as you can see, so far I've installed the power supply, the optical drive, the motherboard and the CPU, and also both of the radiators, the 240mm in the floor and the 360mm in the roof. I've also installed the radiator fans. On this radiator they're in the top compartment up here, which I'll show you shortly, and on the 240 they're on the inside. You can also see that I've used fan grills to protect the fan blades on the bottom radiator and to protect the radiator fins on the top radiator. Now I'm going to go back and give you a more detailed look at all of these components, except, as I said, the components that I've reviewed. Now, I've done a separate review on the NZXT Switch 810 gunmetal. I'll put a link on the screen. I've also done a separate review on the Asus Maximus 5 formula. Now, some of you may have noticed that I've actually swapped over the radiators, and this was because one of the EK radiators I was going to use had a slight problem. So I have here two black ice radiators, and I normally use black ice radiators in most of my builds because of the incredible quality. These are SR1s. They have a 9 FPI, they're 54 millimeters thick, so they're designed for silent configurations. The fins are 45 micron, they have a single inlet and outlet, they're G1 1/4 inch, and they have M4 mounting threads. I prefer M4s over M3s because the threads are stronger. There's also a good gap between the mounting holes and the fins and water channels, so you have a bit more leeway with the length of the bolts that you use. Matte black paint job. The end tanks are fairly small, so you can fit these radiators into tight spots. Now you see some companies advertising their radiators as all copper. Now they might be in the water path, but the outer panels are often steel. It makes the radiators incredibly heavy and it rusts over time. These radiators are all copper and brass, so they're light and they don't rust. Now just a very brief look at the radiator fans that I'm using. So these are Noise Blocker Black Silent Pro PLPS, and I've taken a look at them many times previously in my videos, so all I'm going to do is give you the basic specifications. They're a PWM fan, 600 to 1500 RPM, 1.833 millimeters H2O, static pressure maximum 23.5 to 58.86 CFM, and 8 to 24 decibels. Just a brief look at the Corsair AX750. Again, I've covered the AX series in previous videos and most of you will have seen plenty of them by now. The reason I almost always use Corsair power supplies in my builds is because of the quality and reliability. I mean, the AX series has a 7-year warranty. You can see the fan curve there. The fan doesn't even kick in until the power supply reaches 150 watts of load. Silence is extremely important, mainly in a water-cooled build. And just the basic specifications, so on the single 12 volt rail, 62 amps and 744 watts. So now coming back to the build, just a look at the optical drive from around the front. Now I'm going to leave the hot swap bay free. It's always good to have a free hot swap bay, that's what they're about, because I have enough room to install the SSDs and hard drive into this hard drive cage. There's spots for 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch. Now, I know people are going to comment on the optical drive, people are going to say that I should paint it black, things like that, but seriously, to me, an optical drive always looks terrible. It doesn't matter what you do to it. It's going to be mostly hidden anyway. So just a look at the configuration at the top here. So one of the great things about the NZXT Switch 810 is this compartment in the top of the fans. It leaves so much room for thick radiators and even a push-pull configuration. You can see that there is actually enough room for push-pull in there, but because of the specifications of these radiators, push-pull is really not going to make a difference. It's just completely unnecessary. With a 9 FPI, you only need low RPM silent fans to move air through the radiators. They're not going to benefit from push-pull. A radiator that would benefit from push-pull is something like a 20 or 30 FPI radiator. I'm definitely going for silence in this build. I always do. It's one of the main reasons for installing a water cooling system. The next thing I'm going to do now is install the EK Supremacy. I've done a separate review on the EK Supremacy. Click on the link on the screen to check that out. I also included a guide in my review on how to swap out the jet plates in the EK Supremacy, because it comes with different jet plates optimized for different CPU sockets. A universal jet plate, one optimized for socket 1155 and another optimized for socket 2011. So I'm going to have to now swap out the universal jet plate for the socket 1155 jet plate before I install it. So I've now installed the EK Supremacy, and the next thing I'm going to move on to is the installation of the memory. So the memory is a 16 gigabyte kit of 1866 megahertz Corsair Dominator Platinum. It runs at 910/927 1.5 volts. And this is definitely some of the most incredible looking memory. It follows on with the similar aesthetics of previous Corsair Dominator memory, but they've really taken it to the next level. So there's the bar across the top, and underneath that is white lighting, and apparently in the future it will be interchangeable with different colors. But this is some awesome looking memory. The coolers are highly effective. This memory will be great for overclocking. There's no need to water cool these modules. You can see a connector there, that's for Corsair Link. Also a black PCB. I'm looking forward to seeing how this memory is going to perform. I'm also going to be overclocking this system. All of the results will be at the end of the build log. So there's the memory installed, and it's going to suit this build well. The silver bars over the top are going to match up with the BitsPower Black Sparkle fittings that I'm going to use. And also, because I'm using UV lighting in this build, the very subtle white lighting in this memory is going to be easily visible because UV lighting is not going to really affect it much. Now for a look at the Samsung 830 series SSDs and the Western Digital Green 2 TB. Now that's all ready to be installed into the build. You might be thinking, why didn't I get two of the same sized SSDs and do RAID 0? The client actually already had one and needed a bigger one, so that's why I couldn't do it. Now one of the great things about these SSDs is that everything in them is made by Samsung, so that means excellent quality control and optimization. So you can see all of the different Samsung components there. You can also see the specifications of the different sizes. The main difference is the maximum write. These SSDs are also 7mm thick. So brushed aluminium top, Samsung logo there. That's the size down in the bottom left hand corner. They're a great looking SSD, powder coated black finish on the bottom. But anyway, that's really all there is to them. Time to get them installed. I will include performance results at the end of the build log for both of these SSDs. So here's the SSDs all ready to go, and this is really the last time you're going to see them because of the design of the NZXT Switch 810. This is another thing that I like about this case. The only way you can see the drives is from around the back, which is where you connect the cables from. From around the front, these hard drive cages are closed off. It's so much cleaner, than most cases where you can actually see the drives from this side, because then you can see right through and you can see all the cables and it looks terrible. So I much prefer this. If you still want to see your SSDs, you can just go installing them somewhere like on the sides of your power supply or anywhere else in full view. Next up, I'm going to install the pump and reservoir. So I have here all of the components that are going into this configuration. I have the BitsPower D5 mod kit, and this is the matte black version. I have the BitsPower D5 mod top. This is the clear version, so this is actually the pump top. I also have the BitsPower upgrade kit 150. This includes the BitsPower 150mm reservoir and an upgrade kit that allows it to be installed directly onto this pump top, and also the dual version of this pump top. And I also have the Coolant's PMP450S. Usually I use the Swiftech MCP655. This is actually exactly the same pump, just a rebrand. As well as that, I have a UNZ2 bracket, which is going to allow this entire configuration to be installed onto the lower 240mm radiator. So like I said, this pump is just a rebrand. All Coolants has done is put a little sleeve over the original packaging with their branding on it. They've also put a sticker on the pump. But here you can see the actual manufacturer. It's a Lang D5 and they call it the Strong/810N. And it's been rebranded by Coolant, Swiftech, XSPC, AlphaCool, and a few others. So now you can see just how many components go into this configuration, and actually it's a fairly costly little configuration, but well worth it for a number of reasons. I use this particular pump top and mod kit often in my builds. And one of the reasons is because BitsPower is the only company that makes not just a pump top, but also a full mod kit. So once you install this onto the pump, it covers the entire pump. You can't see any of the original pump, and that's a good thing because this pump is incredibly ugly. Now, I actually did a separate video with an installation guide on how to install this pump top and mod kit onto this pump. Also the dual version of this pump top. I covered all the details of all the different versions. Also the benefits that come from a pump top. For example, take a look at all the different inlet and outlet options it gives you. The G1 1/4" thread so that you can install your own fittings. It improves performance and flow. Also massively improves aesthetics. I mean, you can install LEDs into the pump top. Another thing that I've noticed is that it makes the pump quieter, because the specifications say the pump's at 40 decibels. That's extremely loud. I usually use 20 decibel fans in my builds, and I can't hear this pump with this mod kit over my fans. Now, there is a lot of components here, and I don't actually use all of the components in this configuration. There's two different options for stands here, because there's a stand that comes with the mod kit. There's also a stand that comes with the Bits Power Upgrade Kit 150. So depending on your configuration, you can use one or the other. But I'm going to get all of this assembled, and then you'll be able to see how it all goes together and what it looks like. Just quickly, the basic specifications of the pump: it puts out 17.4 litres per minute, 50 psi, it can handle 5.1 meters of head, and it's somewhere less than 40 decibels. I've now assembled the pump and reservoir configuration, and you can see what I mean by how the pump is entirely enclosed inside the mod kit. So we have the matte black mod kit on the back, the pump wiring comes out through one of the holes there, and the pump top on the top, and you can't see the pump at all. It's an awesome looking configuration with plenty of inlet outlet options. The Bits Power Upgrade Kit 150 is bolted onto the top. You can see the 4 M4 Allen key bolts around the outside, the inlet in the middle there, and there it is. It's all assembled and ready to go. All I need to do now is bolt the stands onto either side, and it's going to sit in there. So I've just set the stands in there temporarily, and the reason I've stopped now, the problem I've run into, so I've bolted on the UNZ2 bracket, so that just fits straight onto the 120mm fan over the top of the fan grill there. But you can see that these don't have holes in the middle, only on the outside. And I mean, I could bolt it off to the side like that, but then, you know, it's got flex downwards, and it probably would be strong enough to hold it, but there's no way I'm going to do it. I'm going to drill a hole exactly in the middle of both of these brackets, and it's going to sit in the middle like that. So it's only an extremely minor mod, but I thought I might as well just show it anyway, because everyone's always asking for me to show more of the process of my builds. So what I've actually had to do here is remove the UNZ2 bracket again, which I expected. So I actually left it loose, but I've used the holes that I drilled, and I've just gone down with some M4 button head Allen key bolts. I think they're 6mm. M4 washers, looks pretty good, pretty clean, and underneath M4 washers and nuts. So I haven't tightened it up yet because I still need to get the pump in there. So there's the configuration, all set up, ready to go. I'm now going to bolt it into the case. Actually, before I do, I'm going to sleeve that wiring. Okay, the pump and res config is mounted, and you can see how it's mounted. The brackets I drilled the holes in, they came with the Bits Power Upgrade Kit 150. I've mounted them to the UNZ2 bracket, and the UNZ2 bracket is mounted down through the fan grills, through the fans, and into the lower 240mm radiator. And this is a great looking configuration because it's freestanding. The other way to do it is to use brackets around the reservoir, but this looks so much cleaner. Having nothing around the res just looks awesome, you know, in my opinion. And you might be thinking that there'd be problems with the strength of this config, because there is a lot of leverage from the top of that reservoir on those brackets. There's no doubt about that, but because of the strength of the brackets, and also because of the M4 bolts that I've used, you know, it's all in the way you mount it. There's no problems with strength there at all. Also, what adds to the strength is the crystal link configuration you can see behind the pump and res. The main reason I used crystal link back there is because it looks a whole lot cleaner than tubing, and I thought it would go well with the pump and reservoir configuration. You're not actually really going to see it once the build is finished. You'll just see a short part of it but it was also such a short distance between those two fittings, so it was a good opportunity to be able to use Crystal Link. You can see all of the extra fittings that I've had to use so that I could go with Crystal Link. Basically, the angles of the adjacent fittings have to be perfect, and it takes a lot of extra fittings often to get those angles. So at the top I've used a 90-degree single rotary, at the bottom I've used a 45-degree single rotary and a 90-degree dual rotary. I've also started installing some other fittings around the build, and I am about to start on the tubing, but before I do, I need to install the graphics card, and I also need to install the graphics card water block. So I'm going to wrap this part of the build log up here, and I'm going to start the next part of the build log with the graphics card water block installation. That sums up this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favorite if you want to see more.